It's what gives the god races their meaning, their ability to naturally subvert others under their command, bypassing power levels of the individual targeted, Odette explained, turning her attention back to the little girl. She's young, obviously, so definitely a god's child. With that explanation, it finally dawned on Ryuk. He knew the little girl was beyond normal. She had been sealed in a high-level prison that even an Exignis stage cultivator would find hard to break out of. Not only that, the entire prison itself had been sealed up with countless runes, each holding different effects that most likely further suppressed the person inside the building. All this, just for a kid, was abnormal. But now, with the explanation of her being a god's child, it was only reasonable. "Where did you get her from?" Odette asked. "An organization. Their base is held within a spacecraft that endlessly wanders around the void, abducting any spacecraft they come across. They experiment on many different races, mostly mythical beasts, and she was just one of those prisoners. I was thinking she was probably one of those whose ship was abducted by the organization, but now," he said, and Odette naturally understood. Whoever those people are, they must either be confident in their ability to hide her, or they must have simply been suicidal enough. Right now, as we speak, I'm sure there must already be a ship of god race experts flying towards Amamura with the intent of taking her back. If I were you, I would do away with her as fast as I can," Odette said, and Ryuk hummed before shrugging it off. "You say her race will be coming for her soon, right? That's good. I'll hold her until they arrive, then return her to them. Simple?" he said with a goofy smile, but Odette wasn't smiling. "They'll kill you," Odette said plainly. "Ha! God races aren't like us. You think they will realize you weren't the one who kidnapped their own, and won't bother with you, but that's wrong," Odette said. "The god races don't think like us, nor do they follow our sense of reason. We can't understand them, and they also can't understand us. Nobody tries to reason with them as they can't be reasoned with, and they also never care to reason with us. The same is true for the girl in your arms, and when her family comes, they won't understand you, even if it seems like you can speak with them. It's like a tamed beast that suddenly switches up on you. It doesn't matter how good you were able to communicate with them previously. It will be for naught once they enter that state. So get that girl off your hands, Ryuk," she said, this time more of a command than advice. In response, the little girl's hands squeezed around his neck, rainbow tears spilling from her face and soaking into the back of his shirt. Though silent, the scene of her tearing up held such a magical effect that would bring even full-grown men to tears with her. But they didn't provoke any emotion within Odette. She knew what she was, all cute and innocent, but her race? All of them were psychos, acting in ways no one could understand or predict. She must have left the sight of her family to have been kidnapped in the first place, but that didn't mean she was free from their influence. When they get to Amamura, they'll make it shake with their arrival. "No," Ryuk responded, causing Odette's eyebrows to twitch. "Thanks for the information, though. Makes things a lot clearer," he said, sitting back on the sofa, the girl clinging to his neck once more. "What do you plan on doing with her? Don't tell me you've fallen in love with her," Odette asked, and Ryuk almost puked at her words. "What the? TCH, what do you take me for?" he asked as she shrugged her shoulders. "If you're not in love with her, then why are you so adamant about keeping her?" she asked, and Ryuk's smile faded. His brows tightened as he thought. "I got her out of the hands of that evil group, and hope for her to return to safe arms. Hence, until her family arrives, she is my responsibility. If I can understand her, then I can understand whoever her family is too. And if I can't, at least I guaranteed her safety and fulfilled my responsibility. Even if it kills you in the end?" Odette spoke out. "Yes," Ryuk replied, but his response, most especially the way he said it, all of it made Odette's heart, for just a second, stop beating, and she took an unconscious step back with her mouth slightly agape. But it only lasted a moment before she stepped forward again and sat on the sofa, as far away from him as possible, due to the girl in his arms. I've noticed something peculiar about you, Ryuk, she said, piquing his curiosity. Oh? And what's that? You have less fear of death than most, she said, and it wasn't really what he was expecting. I remember when I first met you, you were with that angelic girl. You saved her life by disappearing into that dark rift of yours. But when you came out, you were alone. I thought she must have somehow escaped without you, but now I don't think that's the case, she said, leading to a faint thump in Ryuk's heart. Something tells me you chose to stay behind of your own accord, even knowing well you could die in my hands. And even now, knowing full well that a god race is coming for you, with a high plausibility of even dying in their hands, you remain adamant. All of this made me realize that your fear of death is lower than most, she said, as Ryuk scratched the back of his head. He knew in his heart the reason why he feared death less than most, but he couldn't say it aloud or even think it, as that made lead Raksasha to learning of it. Something he would rather keep a secret from her. So even though he knew it, he didn't let himself dwell too much on it. I guess that's a good attribute to have, no? He asked, only to watch Odette shake her head. No, it isn't a good attribute. It's actually a stupid one instead. I don't think that is true, Ryuk responded, leading to Odette grinning in interest. You think it isn't stupid? She asked, and he nodded, feeling the girl in his arms grip harder around his stomach as she buried her hand in his chest, seemingly in search of comfort. He rubbed her hair chaotically, making her smile goofily. I think fearing death makes us commit a lot of mistakes and takes us farther away from growth. Also, you were right, he said, turning to look at her. Ha! Orlith didn't leave me behind. I had a choice to follow her and escape, something she calls a temporary retreat. I don't necessarily find that to be wrong, but the truth is, if I had run away from the fight with you, I wouldn't be half as strong as I am now, mentally and physically. I grew from that fight, and that only happened due to my lesser fear of death, you could say. She hummed silently under her breath. And when you ask me to let this girl go because of her dangerous background, if I left her, she might just get captured again like before. She was lucky to have me save her previously, but who knows what will happen this time. Whatever it is, it would leave me doubting my ability to protect or follow my goal to the end. I know self-doubt sounds like something tiny, but it is a crack in defense that may be exploited one day. After all, I've constantly exploited my own enemy's self-doubt, he said, leaving Odette silent for a while. It was hard to debate. He had grown stronger from facing her. She knew this when he had suddenly burst up in those bizarre white flames of his. Those flames held great power, but she also knew they weren't being used to their full potential, as if they had just been awakened in that fight. It was a growth that truly may never have happened if he had not fought her. And his concern for the girl wasn't unreal. Sure, she had her god authority that reflexively protected her, but god authority wasn't invincible. She could bypass it if she truly wanted, and most people should be able to do the same, even if they aren't as strong as she was. It must have been how the little girl got herself kidnapped in the first place. Besides, if Ryuk dropped the girl and she somehow found her way back to her family, what if she led her family back to Ryuk to deal with him for betraying her? Wouldn't that just lead to regrets about leaving her in the end? Something that might have been avoided if he had simply subdued his fear of dying at her family's hands. His lesser fear of death potentially led to faster growth, while also lowering his chances of making mistakes. Truly, it was risky as he could die. But if he didn't, he grew faster than if he had never risked it. Was not fearing death really as stupid as it seemed? You may be right, Odette said, agreeing with him in the end, and Ryuk smirked in victory. But also keep in mind, it all ends with death, she said. One unlucky event, one risk too big, and you will cease to exist. Then it wouldn't matter what your beliefs are. You will be dead and soon forgotten by most. You risk death too much, then your end is certain, she said, each word like a divine decree that echoed straight into his soul. I know, he whispered faintly beneath his breath. Less fear of death might sound cool, but he knew deep in his heart it was the same as gambling. Except that he was gambling with his life, the riskiest thing one could gamble with, and he wasn't just playing it once. He was actively playing it almost all the time. In fact, he had been playing this game ever since he could remember. His fight with a Grade E creature that Uncle Bob had warned him about was a gamble on his life, as that rat could have ended him. His fight with Ignatius was a gamble, since he might have been killed by the fallen angels if he had lost. His fight with Zarkul, the seventh calamity, was a gamble, as he would have been killed if he had lost, and had actually been killed theoretically since he fully exhausted his last bit of life aura in that fight. And even right now, his goals, him wanting to get back his body parts, that was another big gamble of its own, since every encounter with any of the calamities meant a high risk of death. Somehow, all his life he had been gambling. Perhaps that was why going through risks that others would find stupid only seemed natural to him. Odette is right. Less fear of death is stupid in its way, he thought, when a giggle echoed through the room. He turned to look at Odette, laughing. It's good to see we both agreed in our own way, although I still don't support you keeping that girl around, she added, and Ryuk shrugged helplessly. You ever ask her what her name is? Odette asked, as Ryuk shook his head, turning to look at the girl. It was almost like she could feel his gaze, as she also turned her eyes upwards. What's your name? Ryuk asked telepathically, and she remained quiet for a while before replying with a word. Iris, she responded telepathically, watching as Ryuk whispered. Iris. So simple yet beautiful. Iris, Odette asked, picking it up from Ryuk's whisper. Yes, Ryuk said, watching as Odette's eyebrows furrowed further. You might not know, but that word means the god of rainbow in an ancient mythology. And the god of rainbow in that mythology is a messenger of the gods, she concluded, leading to Ryuk chuckling. Are you saying she's like some sort of messenger sent to me by the gods? He said, laughing goofily, and Odette rolled her eyes. Whatever. Just keep her away from me? She added, preparing to bring up her holograph and continue her browsing, only to feel the faint rustle of the air. Turning to the side, she saw Ryuk less than a few inches from her with the girl in his arms. I couldn't hear what you said. Can you come again? He said, leaning Iris closer to her as Odette reflexively shifted away, only to be pressed against the corners of the sofa. You! Get away from me! She screamed in exasperation as Ryuk grinned evilly. Now, I know your weakness. So high. The voice rang out directly in Ryuk's mind, and it belonged to none other than Iris. She currently sat in front of him, gripping hard into his arms, as her big rainbow eyes stared down at the fast-moving ground beneath them. Right now, they were on top of an Ammonius that Ryuk had boarded after they moved away from Odette's place. Yes, it's high, he replied back, and she uttered once more. The bird is beautiful, she said, her hands brushing against the Ammonius feathers, giggling coquettishly to herself. She sure looks like she's having fun. The system notification panel flashed, as Ryuk rolled his eyes before blinking twice. Immediately, his Ammamorn panels blinked to life. He went through the messages, and one of the most important was the message belonging to Officer Reese. The last mission he had been assigned had been completed, but since Ryuk didn't return with the group, his Ammamorn points had not yet been credited. He had messaged Officer Reese, but the officer proposed seeing him in person before his Ammamorn points could be issued. The reason? Ryuk himself had been declared dead by the rest of the group, and even his Archguard status had been declared deceased. He needed to resolve that immediately. Odette still didn't want Iris around her, so he couldn't leave her with her, and he couldn't go back home and leave her with Mrs. Linnea. That might lead to too many complications, especially with the unstable status of things with Morgaine right now. So, in the end, he just decided to bring her along with him. Silently, 20 minutes passed before they finally arrived at their destination. They got down and he paid the Ammonius driver. The Ammonius screeched loudly as it soared back into the air, and unconsciously, Ryuk waved back at it, only to look down and find Iris also waving as hard as she could. Come, Iris. Let's finish what we came here to do, and we'll get on another Ammonius to return, he said to her as she nodded in agreement. He held her hands, and they mixed in with the rest of the Amamoran workers. Everyone's so tall. The words echoed in Ryuk's mind after a couple of minutes of walking. He looked down to find Iris ogling his arms and hiding behind him. Indeed, there were many people nearby, and they were all very tall, mostly over 2 meters tall. As for Iris, she was barely over 1.2 meters. It was like an ant walking among giants. Of course, she would be nervous. But in the next second, a gasp escaped Iris' lips as she felt herself lifted off her feet. And in the next moment, she found herself suddenly rising higher than everyone, as her hands gripped tight around Ryuk's head, sitting on his shoulder. "You're tall now, too," he said, as her eyes flashed with a brilliant rainbow light, throwing her hands up in joy. Naturally, the duo attracted attention in the crowd. Ryuk with his weird shimmering purple tattoos, and she with her rare rainbow hair color and eyes. But no one came close, as Ryuk made sure his Archguard halo floated behind him, reminding everyone of his status. Soon enough, they were before the building, where a chubby man was already waiting. "Officer Reese," Ryuk greeted, watching as the man looked at him in disbelief, even wiping his eyes a couple of times. And all of a sudden, a chuckle left his lips, and soon enough, it turned into a full, loud laughter, hugging his stomach as he laughed out loud under Ryuk's twitching eyebrow. "I always knew you had the life of a cockroach. Hard to kill, aren't you, Ryuk?" "Ha ha ha," he said, opening the door to the building as Ryuk followed after him. "Your Amamoran card has been tagged with the deceased status. But now that you're in the physical body, I can quickly get it back online," he explained as they walked up the stairs. "Also, of course, your mission points will be credited along with the reward Amamoran notes," he added, as they arrived in his office. Ryuk put down Iris, placing her on the seat behind him, and finally, Reese noticed her, blinking twice as the girl also blinked back twice at him. "You didn't tell me you had a daughter," he said, turning to Ryuk and smiling at him. "Seems like she took after your genes," he said, as his hand moved to the drawer, and soon enough, he brought out a big lollipop from the desk, passing it to Iris, who did nothing but look at it blankly. "What's your name, little beauty?" Officer Reese asked, but all he got was the same blank look. "Sorry, but she's a really shy one," Ryuk said, taking the lollipop from his hands in her stead. "Don't worry, it's just a normal sweetened sweet." The system panel flashed, as Ryuk unwrapped, before passing it to Iris. "Thank you," he said to Officer Reese, who waved it off. "It's okay. And yes, check your account. I've deposited your Amamoran points and notes inside." "You seen it?" he asked, as Ryuk brought out his service card, and there on it was the count. Amamoran points, 31300/100000. "Yes, it's in," he answered, bringing out the panel and scrolling to his bank account, and there he found 700,000 Amamoran notes rewarded. Total balance, 900,000. The reward for completing the mission is 700,000 Amamoran notes? Ryuk asked in dumbfounded surprise. His last mission rewarded him with 200,000 points, although he did get a 300,000 tip from Sir Leopold. But this time, it was a full 700,000, about 4x his last mission. "Yes, your group was the one who found the missing Archguards," he said, and Ryuk asked, "Even after they were all dead?" Reese nodded. "Over 50 Amamoran Archguards are dead. It was a big blow to the organization," Officer Reese said quietly, and Ryuk paused too. Truly, many people had been killed. But what was scary was that all of this had been done to awaken the monster he currently had on Amamura. But this unfortunate incident leads to a great opportunity too. A new mission. A new mission? The cause of the Amamoran Guard's death was due to the Crimson Demons, who used their blood for an awakening ritual. So, the Center has issued a new mission. Elimination of the spawns of the Crimson Demons. Reese explained, causing Ryuk's brows to crease. "Wait, extermination of their race? Like killing all of them?" he asked, unable to believe his ears. Less than a dozen Crimson Demons had been responsible for the awakening ritual. What's more, they'd already been taken down by their group on Nihility. So why was there a need to wipe out their entire race? That sounded a bit extreme, no? Officer Reese added, as if reading his thoughts. Ryuk gave a simple nod. Maybe it is. But the Crimson Demons are a ragtag group that doesn't have a fixed planet or home, and the only time they're seen is when plotting something insane or evil. He leaned forward, continuing. They're already on the elimination radar of other planetary groups that are just as the Amamoran Service Center. And their use of Amamoran guards for their ritual shows, they're not afraid of adding another powerful organization to their list of enemies. It's only natural that Amamoran Service Center, follows the action of the others and targets them as well. Ryuk hummed under his breath. Also, just so you know, Officer Reese went on, the reward for capturing a single Crimson Demon is 100,000 Amamoran notes, plus 3,000 Amamoran points. I even have a lead on a Crimson Demon hideout right now. He smirked. Get a dozen and that's over 1 million. The rewards are crazy, right? It does sound rewarding, Ryuk admitted. Reese smiled in satisfaction. His safe arrival already secured my promotion to the next hierarchy as a commanding officer. If he partakes in this mission, I could reach the next hierarchy even faster. So what do you say, Ryuk? You in? He asked enthusiastically. No. The blunt reply shook Reese a little, judging from his half-opened lips and widened eyes. Why? He asked, wrying down his surprise. Ryuk shrugged it off. The last mission took a toll on me. I need some time to relax. And besides, there's someone who needs me right now. He glanced at Iris, whose rainbow eyes were currently fixed on the ceiling's design. So I'll have to refuse, he finished. Reese nodded slowly. That's reasonable. As an archguard with more than 25,000 points, a quarter needed for hierarchical progress, you're only required to perform 1 mission for Ama every 3 months. Reese explained, something even Ryuk wasn't really aware of. So, if you feel you need some time off, then a time off it is. Being an archguard is already dangerous, after all. I'm glad you understand, Ryuk said, continuing to stand and pick up Iris in his arms. If that's all, then I'll be leaving. I'll escort you out, Officer Reese replied, rising with him, and they both moved out of the office. Also, that reminds me, how did you even remain trapped on Nihility in the first place? I remembered Grozk mentioning you and Oralith. His voice faded as the office door shut, leaving the room in silence. Planning to get a new house. The system notification flashed before Ryuk's eyes, rainbow hair plastering against his cheeks from the rush of wind as the Ammonius flew swiftly through the sky. Yes, he replied curtly, his eyes fixated on his Amamoran panels, which currently displayed various housing options. But why do you even need a new house? You already live with the Dominas, and even Odette's mansion is open. Why get a new place? The system asked in confusion. I'm not looking for a house, Ryuk replied. More of a bunker space, hidden and out of sight, he answered. He expected more questioning, but the system didn't press further. The truth was, Ryuk had decided not to take the quest because right now, as he said, he truly needed a bit of relaxing time. But relaxing time, not in the sense that he wanted to sit at home with the Dominas doing nothing all day long. Too many things demanded his attention now, beyond the little girl in his arms, and his plan could only proceed once he had a safe, secure bunker. Eventually, he found an ad. A strange one. An abandoned bunker, reportedly once used for underwater exploration by some Yorta organization, or whatever they were called. Ryuk chose it immediately. First, because it was cheaper than most, only 150,000 Amamoran notes, compared to the average selling price of 300,000 Amamoran notes. Second, because it was underwater, with the only thing close to land being an uninhabited island, it was sufficiently far away from prying eyes or civilian lives. He purchased it instantly, receiving a digital deed of possession, and most importantly, the cryptic passcode for entrance and location. With that done, he made a few supply runs, ordering the Ammonius driver to stop at a random market. After gathering everything he needed, he stuffed it all into his storage ring. Once he was quietly out of the market, he opened a vortex, and he and Iris immediately disappeared into it, fading away from view. Stepping out, they appeared high in the sky, and once more, Ryuk opened another void vortex, stepping in and vanishing again. He repeated this 15 times until finally, he arrived at his destination. Standing in the sky, beneath his feet was an endless expanse of blue sea, the only nearby feature being a bushy island about 30,000 kilometers away. His eyes narrowed as his Amacomms confirmed the coordinates. This is the location, he thought. Drifting closer to the ocean, he stopped just inches from the water's surface. Execute open protocol. His words rang out, echoing over the vast sea. For a while, nothing happened. Then, the surface of the sea beneath his feet began bubbling like water being warmed, and then a thin glass-like barrier began shifting out from beneath. It raised the water into the air, higher and higher, until it touched Ryuk's feet. Then, like a void vortex, he found himself easily sinking into it. Soon enough, both of them were swallowed by the barrier, which dipped back into the ocean and completely disappeared from view, the sea returning to its calm waves. It's dark. The words echoed straight into Ryuk's head as he stepped forward through the blackness. Iris's voice made him pause mid-step. With his current power level, there wasn't much difference between day or night, but Iris was an exception. "I'll get the light on," he replied, turning to the side and walking up to the wall. He reached for a switch and flicked it on. Bright white light flickered across the entire space. It was blinding at first, but soon enough they both adapted, and the scene came into focus. It was an enormous hall, its vertical height soaring up to 50 meters. Stretching to those dizzying heights were iron structures layered upward in stacked stairs and walkways, each of them bolted into the curved wall of the chamber. The width was narrow, about 10 meters between the opposing walls. The length stretched impossibly far into the darker corners, where faulty lights provided no illumination, though Ryuk could see just fine. His hand reached to the side, fingers brushing against the wall. They were of bare metal, marked with streaks of rust and old welds. He struck twice, the echo blooming through the hall. The wall held firm, and Ryuk gave a stiff nod. His feet rose from the ground, floating upward until he landed lightly upon a railing. Each step made the iron groan faintly, though it still held his weight. The bunker was silent, ghostly silent. The only sounds were the faint buzzing of the lights, the tightening of Iris's arms around his neck, and the soft rhythm of her breathing. It was clearly an abandoned place, and by the looks of it, abandoned for quite a long time. Something that made sense, judging from its low price. His hand reached forward, placing Iris on a platform jutting from the wall. "Where?" she muttered, but he replied faster. "Just stay here for a while. I need to clean this place up," he explained, ruffling her hair. She nodded coquettishly. Immediately, Ryuk began. Glitching away from his spot, he appeared on one of the top railings. His hands reached downward, gripping its edges where it was fixed into the wall. With a forceful yank, the entire railing came free, flying down as Ryuk tore it clean from the wall. The iron crashed in a heap, chaos momentarily filling the space. But Ryuk wasted no time, moving across the hall, uprooting every single stair and railing. Soon, all of them were removed, stacked together into a growing hill of iron. "Did you forget you're underwater?" The system notification flashed as Ryuk turned. Where he had ripped away the iron, water was rushing in through the gaps. His left hand reached out, and a silvery white grimoire appeared in his hands. Flipping open its pages, he stretched forth his right. Cold poured from his fingertips, and within moments, frost spread across the gushing water, freezing it solid. In less than 5 seconds, the leaks were sealed. The grimoire disappeared, followed by golden dots of light appearing over the entirety of space around him. With his sovereign rewriting skills, he smoothed out the jagged edges of the walls until they were polished as porcelain. With that done, He brought out one of the supplies he had bought earlier from the market. Soft wall foam. He flickered from spot to spot, applying it across the walls until the entire bunker was lined with it. It was initially meant for house ceilings or so, but Ryuk didn't care. He plastered it everywhere, transforming the bunker's sterile menace into something oddly cozy, almost like a spoiled cat's den. Then, with a clap, various lights flared across the foams, shimmering mostly in soft blues and faint purples, immediately changing the atmosphere. "Wah! So beautiful!" Her words rang inside his head, and when he glanced up, Iris was staring wide-eyed, mouth open. He chuckled, but was not done yet. Flying up to the ceiling, he took out another purchase, futuristic 3D foam panels. He fixed them into place, then switched on the light. A galaxy of stars lit up above, glowing with purple shimmer. Drifting down, he spread a soft, dark purple rug across the floor, then swooped back up to lift Iris from the platform and place her gently on the ground. She bounced around, trying to climb the walls or cling to the ceiling, to touch the starlight effects of the ceilings, but failed as she couldn't fly or stick to the surfaces. Ryuk chuckled softly. He hadn't gotten much in the way of sofas, but he had bought a large bed, which was made to be converted into a single, large, cozy couch, rainbow-colored. 3 hours passed before he was finally done. The once desolate bunker had become a haven, part cozy bedroom and part vibrant living room, where a purple shimmer mingled with rainbow hues. Half cozy bedroom, half vibrant living room. But that was only one side of the bunker. A glass divider split the space, and beyond it was something entirely different. Something that looked more like, "Wait, is that a lab you're constructing?" The system panel flashed, finally picking up on his plan. "Are you planning on experimenting on something?" "Kinda," Ryuk admitted. "Experimenting on?" "Didn't know Ryuk is now a scientist now." The system robbed in with mockery, but Ryuk shrugged it off. "Not experimenting per se, but more like designing new beings." "Designing?" "Yes," Ryuk said as he stepped into the lab area of the bunker, shutting the glass divider tight with a fingerprint confirmation. Now, he could start one of the things he planned for his relaxation plan. There were 2 things Ryuk could improve on to significantly increase his strength, and they were things he had put off for some time now, simply because he never had the time or space to focus on them. The first, "Hey, system." "Yes." "Activate skills and abilities tabs." He gave the order and the panel quickly materialized. Ryuk navigated down to what he wanted, one of the main reasons he needed a bunker in the first place. Skills and abilities. Subgroup, Techno Forge Authority. Subgroup, Techno Sovereignty. Skill, Sovereign of the Techno Forge LV. Type, active/passive. Description. A unique skill bestowed upon the accomplished trial taker of one of the pieces of the ancient Techno Forge ruin. Grants control over forge-based creations, blueprint manipulation, and legacy artifact reconstruction. His Techno Forge ruin. It was one of the most powerful tools he had in his arsenal. A skill that had managed to remain even after he had rid himself of his 2 original bloodlines. The last time it had truly proven its worth was during the Null War back on Endearth. His constructs had stood against Zarkul's army, allowing him the focus he needed to fight Morn and Zarkul without being bothered by the countless Nulls. The skill was formidable, but unfortunately, ever since, he had neither the time nor the space to upgrade it. He had relied on it to save his life from Owen's grasp, but it had become nearly obsolete during his fight with Odette. The Nihil woman had been able to sever all of his creations without effort. But to Ryuk, that didn't mean the skill was useless, only ignored. With the Mad Ascension protocol, he had pushed it to level 2, unlocking new effects of the Technoforge ruin, things like the basic blueprint archives, advanced cost-efficient designs, and an AI link that had previously been dormant. These new effects allowed him to design nano-warriors with personalized features, forge more techno-guards, and expand his army's capabilities. But when had he ever had the time to sit down and design anything? His constant battles and having to move from one body to another, with things to be done in both bodies, had indirectly lowered the skill's effectiveness. Now, with 3 months of relative freedom, unbothered by the outside world, One of his top priorities was to explore every function of the Technoforge ruin. That meant designing new constructs, the best his imagination could muster, and also leveling the skill up once more. The last time he had leveled it up, the results had been remarkable. All 200 units ascended one class tier upwards, and he had gained an additional 10 Eternity-level experts, 30 Cataclysm experts, and 70 Dominion experts. If he could push it further, then even against an enemy as monstrous as Odette, his Technoforge warriors wouldn't be completely helpless. The room around him was not much different from a science lab. A desk, a chair, beeping holographs, construction tech that could bring any design to life. He didn't need test tubes or archaic tools to forge his warriors. These were more than enough. But before starting, there was one more matter to resolve. A moment later, Ryuk summoned items from his shop. Large triangular prisms covered in bizarre, arcane runes hit the ground with a heavy thud, about 15 in total. Then he settled into the revolving chair, activating new holographs before pausing, his hand reaching to the side. "Activate Void Rift," he commanded. A vortex swirled open from the empty void. It rotated slowly, but quickened as something began to emerge. Something slammed onto the ground, the entire lab shuddering as though struck by an earthquake. An enormous claw, covered in icy white scales. A foggy white mist seeped out of the vortex, a mist so cold it could freeze an Eternity State expert to death. In seconds, the lab became a frozen cavern of breathless chill. Ryuk didn't even turn his head. He stayed focused on configuring his systems, fingers flying across the panels. But soon enough, a massive shadow fell over him. He felt the presence loom behind his breath, a weight pressing on the back of his neck. "I think you've had enough tantrums already, haven't you, Isha?" Ryuk asked calmly, raising his gaze upward. 8 cold, frosty eyes glared back down at him. They were blank of emotion, though Ryuk could still see intelligence flickering faintly within their farthest depth. The figure was none other than Isha. Her 4 heads unfurled, surrounding Ryuk in a deadly enclosure. Slowly, her maws opened, each one gathering a pillar of intense frost, power swelling with the intent to obliterate him utterly. "If you do that, Isha, I swear to the devil, there'll be nothing you regret more in your life than what happens next." Ryuk voiced out calmly, yet amidst speech, his shimmering purple eyes shifted, deepening into an oceanic blue. The sight made Isha freeze, the balls halting in their creation within her maws. Those eyes of his. For the first time, she felt something bizarre. A sensation she could not explain. One that startled her enough to jerk all 3 heads back and take 3 unconscious steps away from Ryuk. She seemed to realize her own unconscious decisions, her surprise changing into irritation and then fiery anger. Her claws rose menacingly, slamming into the ground beside Ryuk. The floor ruptured, water surging up before being frozen solid in an instant. "You were the one who lied." Her 4 maws roared as one, shaking the chamber with their fury. She glared down at Ryuk, who slowly rose from his seat, his gaze unwavering as he looked straight into her eyes. His next words shook her to the very depths of her soul. "Isha," he said, "lies or truth, is your belief in me so little that you think, if I tell you something, and act differently than what I informed you about, my aim must have been to cause you harm, which hence should be returned with you trying to end or gravely injure me?" "You!" Isha roared back, one of her gigantic claws hanging above Ryuk's face, turning the air around him into frigid ice. "You said you needed the sleep. You said it was an energy-conserving mode. But clearly, that was a lie. You were the one who lied," she said, amidst a mushroom of intense icy frost. "Ah!" Ryuk released air from his lungs, watching it turn into frost particles the second it left his lips. "I'm sorry," he whispered, noticing the plummeting temperature slow down for a while. "I'm sorry for telling you what is not the truth," he said. But Isha's cold eyes revealed doubts as she looked at him. His head hung low, not looking at her. His hair covered his face, making his expression unnoticeable, but his fists gave him away. His right fist was clenched tight, and purple veins writhed over his arm, thrumming with impossible power. "Now," he said, turning away to sit back at his desk. "Change back to your human form. You're wrecking the lab." A silent growl escaped her lips, but she didn't push further. She could feel it. He was highly unstable for some reason, barely keeping himself together. Guilt or something else. She didn't know. In an instant, her ginormous form puffed into a mini-storm of ice clouds. Then she stepped out once more in her humanoid form, wearing a gown of silvery white. She moved away from him, towards the glass covered in frost. Her fingers brushed them away, and she looked to the other side to find a familiar person on the bed in the room, her sides rising and falling rhythmically, an obvious sign of sleep. "You also didn't get rid of her," she said, looking at Iris sleeping peacefully on the couch. He had told them he would get rid of her, and it truly seemed he had, but clearly that was far from the truth. "You were the one who begged me to let us keep her in the first place. And somehow now, you're an advocate for her to be gotten rid of." Ryuk muttered under his breath with a scoff, and Isha's face creased in displeasure. "I wanted her to be kept until she was a danger. She made me choose between her safety and that of us all, and I chose what was important," she defended, giving one last look at the living space before moving around the lab. Her wandering naturally brought her to the place where Ryuk had kept the triangular prisms, her eyes flashing with light at the sight. At the same time, Ryuk spoke out. "What were you planning on doing with those beasts?" "You asked me to bring them along," he said. The triangular prisms had been taken by Ryuk when he saved Isha from the organization that had locked her in. She had been experimented on, kept in a tube, and once she got out, she requested Ryuk to bring out these beasts too. He had done so, placing them in the prisms and storing them in his shop. According to her, they were anomalous extinct-level beasts, preserved to be experimented on later. Ryuk had checked on their states just a while ago, and there were a total of 15 beasts, each of them in a slumbering, half-alive, half-dead state. "If you needing to sleep to conserve energy was a lie, then what were you doing all this time? What is here and where is here?" she asked him. The room opposite them, the lab they were in, and the water she could sense were bubbling all around the structure itself. It was clear they weren't in the spacecraft anymore. "I created a clone," Ryuk said, causing Isha to pause in her steps. "My main body was what was in the spacecraft, and my clone was here in another place. I couldn't divide my consciousness into two, so I had to constantly transfer between both. Me needing to sleep constantly meant being awake. In my other clone," he explained curtly, and she asked, "Why did you create a clone in the first place? Also, this world and its energy. This isn't End-Earth. Where is this? Why did you choose to come to this world?" To that question, Ryuk asked, "Do you remember Morgaine?" The question made her turn to him, her brows wrinkling. "The annoying girl? Yes, I do. And I remember both of you falling apart," she added. "We got back together, and I followed her to her original world after the fallen angels left End-Earth and returned to their world, Amamora. So right now, we're in Amamora. Ha 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 ha." Following his words, Isha suddenly burst out laughing, wheezing with her stomach clutched, although Ryuk didn't exactly find out what part of what he said was so funny. He watched calmly as she finally finished her laughter, exhaling a long breath before asking, "So you created a clone to start a new life with your beloved love, and you didn't tell any of us, because you wanted to keep it away from your main life?" she asked, summing everything up with unsettling speed. Ryuk remained silent. For some reason, he felt Isha's words carried more mockery than curiosity. "So," she said, as he watched her look around the lab, before she flashed him a taunting smile. "Where is this beloved love of yours? Ryuk? The one your new life revolves around?" she asked, and before he could respond, she continued, "Oh, I'm sorry. She's nowhere to be found. Again? Could it be that things fell apart? Again?" The sound of bones creaking rang out, its source none other than Ryuk's right fist folding together. "Isha." "Oh, Things didn't work out as you planned with her, did they? How come I'm not so surprised? She said, clicking her tongue in disinterest. Isha, you're pushing too far, Ryuk forced out through gritted teeth. But then, the air flapped with speed, and he saw a blur. In the next moment, she was over him, both her hands pushing his shoulders down, pinning him to the seat. Ryuk! Isha called to him, frosty white breath crawling out of her lips and splaying over him. Her eyes, frosty white, looked squarely into his irises. I'm not the one pushing too far, she whispered, her hands reaching forward towards his face, pausing slightly before they grabbed the strand of hair over his forehead and swerved it back. But, she said, returning her attention to his eyes, I think you're the one pushing things too far. In what way? He asked in return. She kept looking into his eyes for so long before she moved from her pinning position to sit upon his legs. I know why you lied. You loved her, and you couldn't bear to part with her, she said, continuing, so you created a clone of yourself to stay with her and follow her here. But Isha's expression softened, and she fell onto his chest. He could feel the squeeze against him, and she could hear his heartbeat. It beat so clearly, slow, yet so loud. You are starting to be so far away. It's detracting you from us? She whispered, as he exhaled, brushing her hair while forcing a smile. It'll be okay. Trust me, he comforted. No, she replied instantly, turning from his chest and looking into his eyes. I can't trust you, for you just lied to me, to all of us in your main life. Unconsciously, his heart quickened. She didn't say it in anger, but more with silent sadness. I understand why, though, and that's why it's even more worrying for you. Everything you're doing here, you're doing for Morgaine, but it's not working out with us. And even more, I don't think it's working out for you either. I can always return, Isha, he replied. This life, the other life, they're both just a choice away. I can always return. You can. That's true, she agreed. But it's not you. Not me? He asked, confused. Void is growing. He's growing really fast, and changing once more. You don't even know that, do you? She asked, and he paused silently. Is Void evolving once more? I am growing too, Ryuk. I was so worried and confused about my fourth head emergence. Elder Selene helped, and I evolved safely, but you didn't even know that, too. It was painful, and you weren't there to comfort me. And even when I finally passed through that ordeal, you weren't even there to tell me that it was worthwhile. All you do now is check in, ask where we currently are on the map, and a second later you're back to this life. Don't you see you're fading away slowly? You're caring less. Not because you hate, but because you're just too busy. You said you can return, but are you sure that if you return, it'll still be you? Are you sure we won't look strange to you when you lay eyes on us, once in some months? That it'll still be the same Ryuk who knew more about us than we even knew ourselves? Who cared so much about the things even we thought were just minor issues? Are you sure we won't look strange to you when you lay eyes on us, once in some months? Isha, I'm sorry, he said, and he watched with pain as an ice droplet rolled down her face. He moved his hand to wipe off the tears, but when he pulled it back, she held it, pressing it tightly against her cheek. Silently, she remained like this for a while before she opened her eyes once more. I know you don't plan on letting either me or Void know of this life of yours, although my actions seem to have forced you and given you no choice. I'm sorry for that, and I'll be leaving. You can stay. No, I won't stay here, she said, her words adamant and clear. I'll be over there, just a choice away, she said with a slight giggle. I just hope that when you switch back, you haven't completely faded away, she added, and with that, she rose from his legs. Standing to her feet, she turned to the prisms on the ground. When I was captive back in that organization, I learned a lot from the scientists, most especially the levels of bestial potentials. She began, as she picked up one of the prisms in her palms. According to them, ordinary bestial creatures are LV.1s. An ice serpent, like I was previously, a thunderwolf, and all the ordinary beasts are LV.1 bestial creatures, elemental creatures with clear attributes. There are LV.2 creatures, ones that have a unique, almost abnormal attribute, along with their clear, simple attributes, she explained, walking towards him with the prism in her hand. I think Void fits into that LV.2 hierarchy. He seems like a simple Void cat, but he's different because his potential is ever-growing. That's his unique attribute. These creatures in this prism, they're LV.3 bestial creatures, beyond both Void and me, she said, something that left Ryuk unable to muster a word out of disbelief. I heard the organization went through hell to obtain them, and their initial purpose was to try and create more of them. But fortunately, they got attacked, and we were able to get them. At this point, she was already before him. I asked you to bring them all because I want you to fuse with them, she said, and Ryuk's jaw dropped. But why? I never said. Yes, you never said it, Isha interrupted. But I know, Ryuk. I know you are capable of so much more, and you can make it beyond me and Void, can't you? And you could be far stronger than you currently are. I saw that happen when you fused with Void, and Goi even stronger. If you fuse with these beasts, you will grow stronger still. Stronger than if your sole focus was just on me and Void. Isha, you and Void are enough for me, Ryuk said, his tone firm and adamant. She nodded clearly, grabbing his hand and pulling it forward, while placing the prism onto his palm. I know, Ryuk. Me and Void, we're what you have. And truly, I know it is enough for you, as I have never seen you desperate to fuse more beasts. I know you want to be powerful, but when it comes to contracting more beasts to do so, you'd rather find another way. I previously thought it was such an obvious path, and the fact that you're not doing it is because you can't, but something tells me I'm very wrong. And the reason why you never went down the path of strength by contracting as many beasts as possible must have something to do with me and Void. Isn't that true, Ryuk? She asked him with a smile, as he remained seated in silence. Could he get more beasts? Of course he could. Even when he only had her, he already had the space to contract up to 11 beasts. And now that he was a beast sovereign, with King's aura having been upgraded to its maximum, the number of beasts he could contract was partially unknown. He never even cared to know the exact number, because it was definitely more than he would ever be able to finish using. Ironically, contracting beasts was also definitely one of the fastest ways he could grow. But he knew he needed to regulate that, to ensure balance and familiarity with every beast he contracted. He preferred deep bonding and loyalty over simply gathering them. As he saw them more as a family than as a collection of power cards he could just pull out anytime he got in a pinch. It was a sensible belief, but also a very limiting one. So in a way, yes, he truly was doing it not just for himself, but also for the convenience and well-being of the beasts he already had. I want you to fuse with more beasts, she said, this time even more firmly. What changed? He couldn't help but ask. The way Isha wanted him to contract new beasts was so unlike her. The usually jealous and clingy Frost Wyvern, who never appreciated others being around him at all. Contracting more beasts was a risk to her, and somehow she was the one urging him to do it. So what really changed in her? What happened to make her like this? Many things changed back on that ship, she whispered aloud. Her gaze was on him, but her eyes seemed lost in the past. Truly, Isha had changed since her abduction. Being trapped and dissected by the organization had given her a glimpse of a reality that existed beyond Ryuk's side. She had seen creatures experimented on until they couldn't take it anymore, reduced to nothing but a puddle of blood. And what was worse was how the scientists laughed at their deaths, not even batting an eye while they watched beasts get killed in the most excruciating pain, one by one. She had thought she would suffer the same fate, but she had been saved. Still, being saved never erased the memories of what she had seen. She could see them playing out vividly every night. She was pulled out of her thoughts when she felt his hands grab her wrist and pull her forward, as she fell into his embrace once more. Tell me how you truly feel, Isha, he said softly to her, and she remained silent. a silence that lasted so long before she finally spoke. "I get jealous, Ryuk," she whispered, something that didn't really surprise him. He knew that was one of her weaknesses. "I think that's okay," he responded, but she shook her head. "No. You only say that because you don't know how jealous I really get." "You sure?" he asked, tauntingly, and she responded, "I got jealous when I saw Void's egg and learned you planned to fuse with him. So jealous that I even welcomed the thought of taking the egg away and hiding it," she said, making Ryuk's eyebrows crease in surprise. "I get jealous when Morgane touches you, or even when you speak with her. Sometimes, I wish I could sink my claws into her throat and rip out her lungs," she said, so softly, each word brushing close to Ryuk's ear that his heartbeat unconsciously quickened. "That's really bad. But back there in that lab, I learned that it was really petty. The beasts were losing their lives to experiments left and right. Their lives weighed less than nothing. I didn't even know if you were alive or dead, and my death was only a matter of time. My jealousy, my desire to be the only one, it was all so inconsequential the second I got exposed to a power far stronger than I was. And when, in the end, I only got out of there alive because of you, I learned even more. You were the good guy, and the only one that I have. And now, the stronger you get, Ryuk, the safer I will feel. My jealousy won't help either me or you when we face danger. It's petty. So I'm not only trying to grow stronger, but also making sure you are stronger too. So if there ever comes a day when we're in a hard pinch, we'll both be there for each other. And if one day we fail, at least it'll be only after trying our best. I hated Void before he was even born. But now, I don't even understand why I hate him anymore. It just makes it feel even more petty when I think of my worries and jealousy of him. But I've also come to realize that, with just me and Void, you're not even half close to trying your best at all, Ryuk." At this time, she pulled away from his shoulder, looking into his eyes. "I know you're only at this level of strength because you consider me and Void in your decisions, but I fear that might be just like my jealousy when a bad situation arises. I don't wish you to realize one day that your decision to not grow stronger as fast as you could, despite all the options available to you, was just as petty as my jealousy in the end. So, do your best to grow stronger, Ryuk," she said with a smile. "Do it for me and Void." It's like she's suddenly grown by a couple more years, isn't it? The system notification blinked silently before Ryuk, who sat quietly on the chair, tilting it in such a way that he could look at the ceiling above. "Yes, it is," he muttered, reminiscing about his discussion with Isha. And truly, to Ryuk, it was as if Isha had grown by a couple of years. From the usually childish, carefree, and clingy girl, she had become more understanding of her own weaknesses, and even his. All of this happened because of what she faced during her abduction. It must have affected her more than he thought. But even though those events had occurred quite some time ago, he never really had the chance to sit her down and ask what truly went on, or what she went through back then. Slowly losing myself, huh? He thought silently. I just need to take things slower. With time, I'll eventually figure it all out. He concluded, rising from his reclining position to sit upright. Isha had returned to the ship, refusing to stay here. He could have forcefully kept her if he wanted, but he knew Elder Selene needed Isha around her to reach her destination, the Frost Wyvern ancestral home. That was also one of his goals, to uncover Isha's background. In a way, his core mission had never changed at all. His reasons for coming to the upper realm were still being achieved. Antares had found his tribe, and soon enough, Isha and Elder Selene would find the Frost Wyvern ancestral home. Once that was done, another of his major goals in this place would be completed. But after that came his true main goal, to finally head to the Null's home, to face all the calamities, and to take back everything they had stolen from him. He was consciously leaving that as the last task to complete, because he knew the difficulty it would bring. And speaking of difficulty, he rose to his feet and stepped forward, looking at the prisms scattered across the ground. Ryuk bent down and picked one up, staring at it, though really he was reflecting on what Isha had said. Her words lingered in his mind, making him question his belief that preferring deep bonds with his beasts over simply having many was the right path. Would that belief someday be like her, jealousy, petty and insignificant? He had always been staunch on what he believed in, never going against them, irrespective of the situation. But one of Isha's words stuck with him. If we fight and fail, then at least we knew we did our best. But I've also come to realize that, with just me and Void, you're not even half close to trying your best at all, Ryuk. She couldn't have been more right. Truly, he wasn't doing his best when it came to fulfilling his contracted slots. That was one area where he fell short. If he lost to a stronger opponent, would he die satisfied that he had lost only after doing everything he possibly could to grow stronger? Or would he regret not pushing further, not doing enough? It struck deeply at him. As much as he wanted to deny it, he could imagine the scenario all too clearly. Most likely, he would die with regret. Is it wrong to stand for a belief? He muttered, not to anyone in particular, but then it blinked before him. It's not wrong to stand for a belief, Ryuk, but only if the belief is not a hindrance to you. His brows creased in confusion. A hindrance to me? Yes. Take, for example, one of the greatest beliefs that has stuck with you until now, your belief that you can force fate to give you its good side by working even harder. This belief can be contrasted with the belief of Quinn from back then. Quinn believed fate had already been set in stone, and there wasn't much that could be done to change it. His fate was that he would never be able to face the 10 ultimate geniuses, and what happened to him in the end? He lost. Yes, he lost to the ultimate geniuses. But you didn't, even though at first you both were roughly at the same level of power. Do you know why? It was because you grew stronger. But before you even tried to grow stronger, there was belief. You saw a hopeless situation, and while Quinn blamed it on fate, you believed that if you worked harder and grew stronger as fast as possible, fate would reward you with something better. This type of belief is worth cultivating, for it is a belief that strengthens you, pushing you to go the extra mile, something necessary for success in your endeavors. But your belief in preferring loyalty over numbers, while true, is also a hindrance. Sure, your beasts keep their loyalty, but at the same time it makes you limited. If you face a stronger opponent who manages to knock you down just before you die, the thought will sneak into your head. If only I had fused with more beasts, perhaps I wouldn't be in this situation. So, it is a crippling belief. The beasts keep their loyalty, yes, and you gain firmer bonds, which is very important for using bestial power, but it also leaves you with less than you are truly capable of. So you have a good and a bad, and they cancel each other out, leaving you with what in the end? Nothing. So it's not that having a belief is wrong. It is having one that hinders you that you must watch out for. And besides, to me, you don't truly understand this concept of loyalty in and of itself. You think by keeping a lesser number of beasts, you're able to keep their loyalty strong. I think you're wrong. 1 beast, 2 beasts, 10 beasts, 15 beasts, even an army of beasts, who said numbers have anything to do with loyalty? Loyalty is an understanding. An understanding? Isha, no matter what you do, will forever be loyal to you. Sure, she might flip out sometimes like she did recently, but you heard her words after she cooled down. She knew deep in her heart that you're the one good guy she can always rely on. Why do you think she would stop believing that just because you fused with more beasts? The question left Ryuk completely speechless. You have already proven your heart, Ryuk, and you have done it more than enough times. The bond you share with her isn't something a decision, such as trying to grow stronger and fusing with more beasts, would break. Even more so now that she has realized her jealousy was only a petty thing, and understands that you growing stronger also equals her being safer. The same goes for Void. You have already proven your loyalty, so he doesn't really care much, because he knows that no matter what, you've always got his back. His loyalty won't fade just because you added more beasts. It's not about keeping fewer beasts to prove your loyalty or earn theirs. It's about making each of them understand that when the entire world one day turns its back on them, they will always have someone who will fight back against it for them. And that someone is Ryuk. If this belief is ingrained in their deepest core, then you will have their unwavering loyalty. They might sometimes wish to be the only one you have. They might sometimes grow jealous of the care you show others, or if you use other beasts more than them. But that doesn't erase their loyalty. You only need to balance things out, and everything will be fine. The world is too cold for you to harbor a belief that works against you. Do you think if the calamities buried their swords in your heart, they would give a damn about your beliefs? Do you think they would sit and listen to you say, I could have grown stronger if only I had fused with more beasts, but I didn't because of X, Y, or Z? No, of course not. Death, Ryuk, makes a joke out of most concepts in life, and one of those is a hindering belief. If loyalty in beasts is what you want, it isn't something obtained by limiting their numbers. It is proven through action. Get as many beasts as you can. Improve your strength as fast as possible. And to anyone whose loyalty you wish to keep, prove that you're worthy of it, and they will return it to you equally. Only a strong man can show loyalty, not a weakling. If you believe in loyalty, then you had better be strong too. The system explained at length, and Ryuk sat silently for a while. Time passed as he thought over every single word, reflecting on his journey with both Isha and Void. 7 hours passed in this deep contemplation before, finally, he shed all the guilt he had been carrying and embraced the will to do what needed to be done. Rising to his feet, his hands elongated into claws, and he dipped them into the prism in his hand, rotating the locks around it. Quickly, the runic formation on the prism aligned, and a moment later, the prism fell to the ground with a loud. It flashed with a bizarre, ghostly green light that reeked of a strong sealing aura, before it finally dimmed. The prism split open to reveal a creature. A creature with a rounded, bulb-like head and 4 prominent eyes, currently closed. His body was soft, lacking bone or rigid structure. From beneath its head, 8 tentacle-like arms extended outward, loosely coiling around each other. Each arm was lined with circular suction cups along its underside. Its skin was smooth as glass, covered in a bizarre mixture of blue and purple runic lines running across its surface. The patterns constantly shifted, from full blue to full purple, and sometimes even faded into a dark, shadowy glow. It remained silent, obviously in a slumber. But looking at such a creature, only one word came to Ryuk's mind. An octopus? He thought in surprise. He had read of them before, and the only time he had seen one was when he traveled with Orlith and they came across that kraken, essentially a monstrous, oversized octopus. This was his first time seeing one so small, and surprisingly not unpleasant to look at. Unexpectedly, it was even beautiful. He bent down to one knee, extending a finger toward the creature. But just before touching it, he paused and asked, "Hey system, what is this creature?" System scanning activated. Scanning complete. Searching database for semblance. Semblance found. Congratulations. Host has come across an anomalous bestial species. A Zafra-kraken. It's a kraken? Ryuk voiced in surprise. The creature before him seemed no different from a regular octopus. How could something so small be a kraken? The Zafra-kraken, according to my database, is an extinct royalty race of the krakens. They were not known for being small, but for being immensely powerful, capable of wielding a unique ability that only they among all krakens possessed, an ability referred to as Oregon. That's all the information available in my database, the system reported, and Ryuk exhaled slowly before making up his mind. Extending his hand forward, he placed it squarely between the creature's 4 eyes, closing his own. A moment later, his eyes snapped open, this time glowing with a blazing blue light. Skill. King's aura has been activated. Wake up! The second the order was given, the entire world lost its lights instantly. One moment he was crouching on the ground, fingers gently pressing against the Zafra-kraken's head, and in the next he was rapidly falling, like one roughly thrown out of a plane. The darkness whooshed past him, like he was falling through clouds, but in a snap, all of this suddenly came to a halt. Ryuk felt his legs find their hold, although he did not feel the weight of the platform that held him. Around him was a dark void, only brightened by the flaming blue light from his eyes. A sound echoed through the void, resembling that of space being ripped open. Turning above his head, he witnessed the abyss parting from its center, and from within this tear, something calmly shone through. An eye! It was an eye so ginormous it covered the entirety of the space above him, its pupils shaped in a double circle. The one within flared with a powerful purple light, while the circle surrounding it flared with a powerful blue light. Once more, an even louder droning sound rang out, and he turned beneath his feet, only to find the space just a couple of kilometers beneath them ripped open. Emerging was the same eye as the one above him. 2 more sounds followed from both his front and back, bringing the total to 4 gigantic eyes, coming from above, below, before, and behind him, all staring unblinkingly at him at the same time. Creeping silence covered the entirety of this abyss. Not a single noise could be heard or made, until, tch. A groan of displeasure left Ryuk's lips, and not even a second later, the entirety of space all around him blew up with a loud bang, space shards flying everywhere. An incredible soul-crushing pressure instantly descended onto the space around him. His body for a second flattened into itself, but seemed more of an illusion, as just a moment later, he expanded back to normal, with Ryuk himself having stepped an inch away from where he previously stood. In the next instant, a surge of blue flames danced around his skin, scorching the flying space shards to ashes before they could touch him. But just as the illumination tried to spread farther, the entire abyss convulsed. A tremor rippled outward from the entity of the enclosure, as if the very foundation of the endless void around could no longer bear the weight of the applied pressure. What was worse, it converged with force toward Ryuk, who stood at the center. He raised his head to find reality above him, tearing open, horizons unfolding inexplicably. From this tear, a core of pure annihilation ignited, not with flame, but with an all-consuming hunger. An implosion followed, devouring the entire void and leaving the space around him in a spiral of nothingness born from the crushing weight. In a moment, the enclosure was no more. Where there had once been the simple void, now held a boundless chasm. At its deep center lay none other than a black hole, silently beating at the heart of this abyss where Ryuk had previously stood. All of this was witnessed by the 4 eyes that still held their initial position. A flicker of emotion flashed within their depths at the result, followed by the eyes slowly closing. But it had not been a second when they all suddenly widened to their max. The collapse from the black hole was still roaring, pulling all matter into its chasm. Yet against the torrents, a hand broke through. White scales, covered in shimmering purple runic lines, gleamed brightly against the creeping darkness. The claws dug into the side of the chasm, anchoring tightly onto it, and then, fractures spread out as a second claw smashed against its center, tearing free from the spiral's current with pure brute force. Ryuk's muscles strained from the power, his scales scratching into nothing, but it did not stop him from rising. His second hand smashed into the edge of the chasm, and then he pulled himself out, headfirst, as he took a deep, rough inhale. It echoed through the void enclosure as he dragged half his body out, and, with just a couple more struggles, he completely removed himself from this crushing abyss, coming to stand crouched, his breathing ragged from exhaustion. Are you? The words rang out through the entire space, like iron scraping against iron. It was incredibly painful to the ear, so loud it reverberated through Ryuk's soul, but in reply, Ryuk raised his fractured, scaled hands, and he moved them beneath the chasm. Pale white flame danced in the center of his palm, and soon enough, its shape changed to form that of a draconic maw that slowly opened up. The second it did, the entire abyss buckled under a sudden force that exploded from within the dragon's maw. The walls of darkness surrounding him were forcibly crumpled inward, layers of crushing pressure compacting together as the entire abyss was consumed by the silhouette of the draconic maw he formed from his sigil of white flames. When the entirety of the void was sucked completely into it, the void itself lost almost all of its colors, leaving just the silhouette of black and white. He himself, along with the 4 eyes that were above him, had turned into a color of white. There was nothing but the draconic maw in his palm that retained its clear color of black, but even that started to reshape, turning into the shape of a ball. Ryuk slowly raised his palm, curling his fingers with the ball over his nails. "What are yo?" The voice had yet to be completed when he flicked the tiny ball straight into the eye that hung above him, and for a moment, the abyss was lost. Even the color of white and black disappeared, quickly followed by a loud, mournful. The crushing pressure that had assaulted him in the beginning, almost crushing him, had now been congealed by him into a dot and returned straight into the eyes. A terrifying explosion completely devoured the entire eyes, instantly blasting them into dust. What followed was a painful cry, as 3 of the eyes in the space around him were instantly destroyed. The only one spared was the eye right below him, and Ryuk turned his attention to it. "You!" The roar came, but a calm voice instantly silenced it. "You were the one who tried to test me first," he said, looking at the eye unperturbed. "All I did was return it." His tone was unruffled, but only silence followed after his words, contrary to what he expected. Still, he continued, "For your question, I know what you are, dragon," it said in a high-pitched voice, sending another long, ringing tone through Ryuk's soul. "What do you want?" It barked impatiently, and in reply, Ryuk stretched out his hand, a runic symbol of a blue circle conjuring in the air before him. "That." The words came silent for a while. "A beast contract seal? You wish to have me become a slave of yours?" Its voice was filled with disbelief, followed by a rage that made the entire realm start quivering all around. Before things escalated, he spoke. "None of the beasts I have contracted up until now are slaves of mine. If they're not your slaves, what are they?" it asked, skeptical. "Your equals." "Equal?" Ryuk mirrored the confusion. It was the first time he had heard of such a concept. "I do not think of them as my equals, but more as a family, to be cared for and protected. And in return, I get people with whom I embark on this long journey, and who also protect and care for me. You must be foolish to think I will believe the words of a beast-taming dragon." It shot back at him, and Ryuk shrugged his shoulders. "That makes sense, I'd be skeptical too," he said with a silent nod. But following that, his hand suddenly moved downward with the seal following his palm as he faced it down to the eye below him. "But I didn't come here to be told no," Ryuk replied. A moment later, his outstretched hand folded its claws into his palm, drawing forth drops of blood. "You cannot force a being like me to a contract without my will." The voice roared out loud, but Ryuk's expression didn't change. He continued, digging the claws deeper, until an entire pool of blood had been formed, magically hanging all around him. When he had bonded with Isha, he had used a total of 3 drops of his blood essence, as recommended by the system. When he bonded with Void, he hadn't needed blood essence because Void was already out of his egg, and it trusted him already. But the creature before him was one only a step lower in strength than he. To bond with it, it was no surprise that it would be harder to bind, but he wasn't worried. With an entire pool of blood flowing around him, he began the chant. Sanguis meus vita nova. Ovum hoc spiritu meo animeter. Fiat voluntas mea. Sanguis meus vita nova. Ovum hoc spiritu meo animeter. Fiat voluntas mea. The endless chant continued, reverberating louder and louder, as the drop of blood all around him began congealing together to form a giant sphere of blood. The runic seal he conjured instantly moved into the sphere, becoming one with it, and with terrifying speed, It buzzed forward with power toward the single eye. Go away! The loud roar boomed through the entirety of space, and the entire void crumbled into itself. A powerful explosion appeared in the pathway of the descending sphere of blood, swallowing it in its chaos, but it was futile. The blood sphere smashed straight through the explosion, half of it immediately destroyed, but the remaining half managed to enter the eye. What followed was a fiery, angry roar that shattered the entirety of space all around like glass. He felt a powerful drag that even his Beyonder dragon form couldn't shake off, but when he opened his eyes in the next instant, he was surprised to find himself back in the lab, crouched on his knees with his hands still resting against the creature. But now, it was twitching its tentacles violently, as a circular blue rune burned on its forehead. Ryuk rose, watching it twitch, obviously trying to resist, but in the end, the runic circle completely spread over its entire tentacles, and soon enough, its twitching completely stopped, leaving it motionless, as the runic seal disappeared into it. All of a sudden, a brilliant flicker of light shone through the lab as all four of its eyes opened up. One of them was responsible for shining the light, the creature's irises dotted by shimmering blue and purple over dark pupils. But Ryuk's brow creased when he saw the remaining eyes dripping with blue blood, cracks spreading within them. You! The words rang out straight into Ryuk's mind, followed by a sickening, mocking laughter. TSK. So much family? It said mockingly, but right after a notification panel flashed before him, congratulations, host has successfully contracted a new pet, a Zephyr Kraken. System attunement for the pet skills has begun and will be completed in a couple of hours. The second those words were uttered, Ryuk exhaled in a bit of relief, and he turned back to his seat. For a second, a flicker of light coalesced in his palms, and he threw it into the air, toward the Zephyr Kraken, whose tentacles flickered with speed, instantly grabbing at the object. It stared at it and beheld a triangular glass tube. One look and it could instantly tell what it was. A high-grade healing serum? Should I be worried that you don't have water to swim in, being an octopus? Ryuk asked as he sat on his seat, or more like fell into it. An octopus? The voice rang out in his mind once more, as loud as a banshee scream and as grating as ever. It made him as amused as it did annoyed. The thought of having to be stuck with such an annoying voice until eternity. I guess that's a no then? He replied, only to be repaid with a loud scoff ringing in his head. A tentacle rapped forth from the Zephyr Kraken, which it used to pop off the cap of the healing tube it had in its hands. Without wasting any more time, it instantly poured the entire content into a slit that opened beneath its four eyes, throwing the tube to the side afterward. It remained where it was until a powerful ripple of energy surged from its slimy body, its form glitching in and out. Immediately, new changes followed. Its three eyes, which had previously been dripping blood and were blinded. An injury that Ryuk inflicted during their exchange in its organo domain suddenly began to heal. The blood splattering all over instantly coagulated and returned to its source, entering the eyes. A bright flicker of light burst forth through the lab as one eye fully opened, sending out an arch of purple and blue. A moment later, another powerful flicker of light shone, quickly followed by another, and soon enough all four eyes were wide open. Finally, the words echoed in its mind, as Tulhai unwrapped his tentacles away from itself. Immediately, its short wrinkled tentacles began elongating, and soon enough, all six of them reached a length of 2 meters. At once, they were placed on the ground, holding firm, and with one swift movement, they pulled themselves up and came to stand on all six. Runic lines began to brighten over its tentacles, its aura rapidly rising through the roof, as the entire laboratory began to quiver. I've finally healed, it thought to itself, a line parting below its face where a row of sharp teeth came shining through. With new surging power, it turned its attention to where Ryuk sat. Hey, you really shouldn't have passed me that. It cackled but suddenly stopped, looking at Ryuk, who currently sat in the chair. Something was wrong. With one careful step after another, It moved closer to Ryuk, elongating itself to rise higher over him, and that was when it properly saw it. He's dead, Tulhai said to itself in disbelief, momentarily shaken. Right now, both of the young man's hands had silently fallen to the side, swaying a couple of inches in the wind, but obviously not from a conscious effort. His head hung to the side, his eyes shut, his face pale, like that of one who had lost too much blood. The thought of it made Tulhai realize. He truly used a lot of his blood essence to try and forcefully contract me. Seems like he couldn't handle that and collapsed, it said silently to itself. Right now, even though Ryuk looked dead, his life aura was still faintly there. A silent flicker of life lingering around him. Perhaps, Tulhai muttered, raising 3 of its tentacles into the air. Immediately, the tentacles began shifting from their previous slimy shape into cold metallic blades that elongated, glowing with a dangerous silvery light. 3 of its tentacles had transformed into piercing swords, and it placed them strategically around Ryuk. One directly above his head, poised to strike from above. Another aimed at his chest, right at his heartbeat, the last by the sides of his ribs. This is just karma, it completed, the silvery light gleaming across the blades. It had been forcefully contracted by Ryuk, against its will. Now, the very one who had bound him had fallen unconscious. The dynamic had changed, and it now held the upper hand. My heavy injuries from the Antiskin organization's experiments have all healed up, and I've returned to my full strength. Even better, I can feel it. All around this place is water. Most likely we're underwater. My realm. If I kill him, I can escape the tiny hold the contract has on me and continue with my adventure. This is my only chance to be truly free. It convinced itself, yet even as it wanted nothing more than to drive the blades down and end his life, nothing happened. The tentacles dangled in the air, refusing to move an inch. What's happening? It said to itself in disbelief, the blades clanking in the air, unmoving. I can't kill him? Why? It screamed in shock. But then, the tearing sound rang out as the tentacles slashed downwards, missing Ryuk by a hair's breadth and driving into the ground, tearing it open. Water instantly began gushing into the lab. I'm not being held back by any force. Then, why? It wondered, turning back to look at the unconscious Ryuk, and it froze in surprise. For some reason, his expression, especially in this unconscious state, it was so vulnerable, so innocent that for a moment, Tulhai lost her breath. In that lapse of concentration, the blades her tentacles had formed shifted back into flesh. She came to realization a moment later, her teeth grinding angrily as her tentacular blades once more began to move. And then, space all around where Ryuk sat was sliced into nothing, marks layering across the floor, until the ground gave way completely, sinking beneath. Yet even as he disappeared into the sea below, there was not the slightest mark of a blade on him, nor the faintest wound. Why? Tulhai screamed in anger, one of her tentacles reaching forward, wrapping around Ryuk and dragging him out of the water, holding him high in the air. But then, the sound of a glass door being opened rang out, and she instantly froze. She turned her head, and there, right behind her with an open glass door, she found someone. A little girl. Silence. Creeping silence that lasted longer than he could keep count of. But soon enough, a brilliant flash of shimmering purple light bloomed through the space as his eyes opened. He was currently lying on his back, above him flickering dots of white starlights with bits of illumination. His mind was blank, but unconsciously he sat up to his butt and looked around. There was nothing but this endless space of dotted white starlight. But when he looked to his left side, he finally found someone. A feminine figure, seated on a humongous blue-colored throne seemingly made from blue shards, her eyes looking at him unperturbed. At the sight of her, his memories spilled forth, and he finally got a grip on himself and where he was. This was his soul space, and the only time he ever came here was when he fell deeply unconscious. As for the lady, She was his Beyonder dragon manifestation. "Hey!" he called to her while rising to his feet. "Long time no see." She remained silent, eyeing him up and down, before reclining back on the throne and uttering, "You're awfully pathetic." The words rang in Ryuk's ears, his face creasing in displeasure. It wasn't from being called pathetic. He was already beyond getting annoyed at ignorant opinions at this stage. But because, "And you sound awfully similar to those guys," he said, resulting in a flicker of confusion in her eye, though it quickly cleared. "You mean your previous 2 bloodline manifestations? Well, maybe they were right." She rubbed in, but all Ryuk did was roll his eyes and return to seating. "Mind letting me know in what way I'm pathetic?" he asked with mild interest. Of course, she had a reply for him. Even after awakening the first Beyonder sigil, you still struggled pathetically to defeat that Nihil devil, and you lost the battle. She reminded him, and Ryuk paused before shrugging. "I guess one can call that pathetic. And what's even more pathetic was your state after, reduced to nothing but a blood bag, whose blood is to be siphoned in and out at her will. And even beyond pathetic is that you allowed this without the slightest resistance. Tell me, for one who holds a bloodline that managed to survive the erasure of an era, isn't that awfully pathetic?" she asked, and Ryuk's bored expression paused for a while, a serious glint flashing in his eyes. "So, you realized it too," she said, watching him sit upright. "You think I'm pathetic for not resisting having my blood sucked?" "Yes, I do. You know, I too agree it's pathetic. And I'll agree even more that most will find it demeaning to their sense of self as a person," Ryuk said, and a glint flashed in the manifestation's eyes, leading her to ask, "Then why didn't you fight back? Your strength doubled after that fight, but you allowed yourself to be siphoned of your blood. If you felt it was demeaning, then why did you do nothing?" she asked. "Won't you agree," Ryuk said, "that it is quite unwise to fight against something that benefits you?" he asked, and a moment later ordered, "Activate Echo Library." Immediately, the space before him rippled, widening, until the entire area he stood on was completely integrated with a new scene. A simple dark void. But now, floating right above Ryuk were new objects. They were grimoires, a total of 3. One of the grimoires was icy white, his essence of frost. Another was void black, his void energy essence. These were normally the only 2 elements Ryuk had in his Echo Library. But right now there was another grimoire, half a grimoire to be exact, as only half of its size had formed. The grimoire was similar to the void grimoire with the same pitch-black color, but it held a clear difference. Mixed in with this darkness were dots of purple, shining within like starlight. As you already know, hurricane energy allows me to copy essence. These 2 essences I have are due to my soul fusion with my 2 pets, Isha and Void, which also correlated to my Frost and Void grimoires, he explained. But look at this 3rd grimoire that is slowly forming. Where do you think I got it from? A grimoire of abyssal energy, the manifestation muttered under her breath. Ever since she had awakened in Ryuk, she had made it a duty to keep an eye on every one of his actions. Yet even as she browsed through her memories, she couldn't find a reason as to how he could be forming an abyssal grimoire. "Don't tell me," she said, and Ryuk complied. "Yes. Anytime she sucks my blood, she comes directly in with my neck, where firstly my hurricane runes are at their maximum effectiveness. And what's even more, her fangs coated in her abyssal energy pierce into my bloodstream, where the hurricane energy runes are integrated all the way down to the cellular level. My hurricane runes don't just copy her abyssal energy in that moment. They also get a taint, which is passed through every part of me with the aid of my bloodstream. And the result of that taint is the creation of an abyssal energy grimoire," Ryuk explained, leaving her speechless. "Any outsider like you, or even Odette herself, thinks all that is being done is a simple blood suck. But what you all don't know is that each bite of hers leaves an imprint as deep as a true soul fusion. And you might say, well, why not just contract a beast with abyssal energy and gain an abyssal energy grimoire instead of subjecting myself to such demeaning treatment. But, as you can see, her abyssal energy isn't normal abyssal energy, he said, pointing at the clear purple starlights that flickered around her. The grimoire. I'm not sure what they do yet, but during that fight, I learned very well that her abyssal energy was leagues above normal. It was filled with incredible might and soul-crushing, something that I'm sure is unique to her devilish race. Right now, she might be the last Nihil alive since her race had already been wiped out 1,000 years ago, meaning she might just be the last holder of this unique type of abyssal energy in the entire universe. This isn't an energy I can gain from simply contracting a random abyssal beast. The grimoire is half-formed, but soon enough, it will be completed, and I will finally be a true holder of this unique energy of hers. At this point, he deactivated the Echo Library, and all the grimoires disappeared. So tell me, don't you think it unwise to fight against something that benefits you? I never thought of it that way. The Beyonder Dragon manifestation whispered to herself with faintly creased eyebrows. She couldn't understand why Ryuk would allow himself to be subjected to Odette's whims and not complain at all. One of the hypotheses she had was that the defeat must have watered down any hope he had in trying to ever go against her. It was the only thing she could think of. But now, with his words, things were much deeper than she imagined. You talked about her being the only Nihil, and the energy possibly being the only thing in this universe, she suddenly said as Ryuk turned to her. Are you just interested in possessing a unique abyssal energy, or your true goal is to kill her, to make sure you're the only one in the universe to possess Nihil energy? The latter, judging from how you said it, seemed to me to be more the case, she said, studying Ryuk, whose lips parted slightly, and he asked, What's the deal about the throne? He suddenly asked, pointing to the throne she sat on. The last time I came here, I didn't find a throne around, or did I miss it? He asked, watching as she turned to the throne, her fingers brushing against its large armrest. Let me ask you something, Ryuk. You once possessed the Null and a Jade Dragon Draconic bloodline, and now you have a Beyonder Dragon. What would you say are the things you love about the latter better than both bloodlines? Not a goal or reason, but something related to its strength. Ryuk thought about it for a while before answering. Its boost in strength and the strength itself, Ryuk said, and she smiled. Care to explain further? The Beyonder Dragon bloodline has the greatest boost in strength I have ever known. When I fought Odette, my base strength, let's say we try to put it in numbers, was 10,000. But with the Beyonder Dragon skill activated, the number moved up to 50,000. This boost in strength I greatly enjoy because when I had the Null and Dragon bloodlines, I had to activate about 3 to 4 body transformation skills to reach a significant boost in strength. Doing that places a very great strain on the body. And the strength, the pure brute force of the Beyonder Dragon bloodline, is also something I greatly enjoy. Its simple ability to force the entire world to perform a single command of mine, like halt, is one of its strengths, and it's great. And truthfully, those were the things Ryuk loved about the Beyonder Dragon skill. Even if it was just one skill, it was doing something more than important, and it had a simple, unique skill that was easy to comprehend. The Beyonder command. He loved its simplicity and its effect in battle. Well then, she said, reclining back on the throne. What if I told you that the Beyonder Dragon bloodline's strongest point isn't those two things you mentioned? She said, watching his eyebrows crease a bit. Anytime you get into your Beyonder Dragon form, a total of 6 shards slip out and float around your head. Don't they? She asked, and Ryuk nodded. That did happen. Those 6 shards aren't for decorative purposes. They're the 6 divine seals in the Beyonder bloodline. 6 things which make the Beyonder Dragon bloodline a greatly feared one. One of those seals is the sigil of white flames that you awakened from your fight with Odette. Its awakening resulted in the throne that you currently see, she said, and he gave a small, oh. The truth is, the throne is only a tiny manifestation of the true thing. There will be a person sitting on this throne soon, once you fully understand what the sigil of white flames is. Wait, did you just say a person? He asked, his brows creasing in faint displeasure once more. "What, you only want me around?" she taunted, and Ryuk shrugged. "I don't know. I'd rather prefer only a single person berating me than two," he muttered, the memories of the two previous bloodline manifestations once more crossing his thoughts. "The one who appears on the throne is formed from your understanding of the sigil. In a way, you're the one who brings it to life, so berating and all that most likely would never happen, unless you birthed it with emotions of arrogance and pride. Something which, suffice to say, isn't a sickness you're afflicted with," she added, and he grinned. "Did someone just compliment me?" he said with a slick smile, although her expression was as neutral as ever. He could only shrug helplessly, collapsing onto the ground a moment later, while wondering, "I need to get out of here soon. I fell unconscious too fast and left that Zafir Kraken free. I wonder what that thing is doing to me now, strangling me to death," he wondered to himself. "It's not." Her words resounded as Ryuk turned to her. "Oh, I forgot you can see the outside world of me," he said, watching the singular golden runes appear in her eyes. "Then, what is currently happening?" "Iris woke up and came into the lab," she said, and Ryuk's eyes widened. "What?" He had been so absorbed in the lab that he forgot he left Iris was sleeping just a glass wall away from it. "Don't tell me," he said, jumping to his feet, but quickly enough she cut him short. "I would be more worried about the Zafir Kraken than about the god's child." "Huh!" he said, but just then, his spirit form began fading out from the space, a sign of his spirit now being able to return. All he could do was give a look at the Beyonder Dragon manifestation who, at the last second before he could leave, moved her lips silently. Although no words came out, he could clearly hear them just before he completely disappeared from the space. The finger twitched once more and a bright flash illuminated the room as Ryuk snapped his eyes open. The first thing he saw were huge rainbow eyes blinking just a few inches from his face. They moved farther away, and he sat up, only to be pushed back by Iris, who jumped into his arms, embracing him tightly. Unconsciously, he exhaled in relief, wrapping his arm around her. "I'm glad you're okay," he whispered, their embrace lasting for a long while before they finally parted. "Where's the Zafir Kraken?" he asked himself, only to watch Iris turn her gaze behind her. Right now, they were both in the room he had designed, and divided by the glass wall was the other laboratory, currently filled to the brim with water. And even more shocking, inside the lab was the Zafir Kraken. But currently, it was pinned to the wall, its entire body flattened like a paste, staring at Ryuk. His jaw slackened at the impossible sight, but his eyes furrowed when he looked around the Kraken and noticed strands of rainbow-colored hair arranged in a formation, all of their light concentrating on the Kraken. He turned back to Iris and noticed the length of her hair had reduced. "It tried to kill you," she said to him, staring hatefully at the Zafir Kraken. Ryuk picked her up into his arms, moving closer to the glass. His frost grimoire appeared, and he touched the glass. Frost passes through to turn the bubbling water in the lab, parting them to the side before freezing. This enabled him to enter the lab with Iris, and the first thing he saw was the various blade lacerations on the ground, confirming Iris was speaking the truth. "Activate Sovereign Rewriting." Golden motes of light appeared all around him, and immediately the lacerations were covered up and smoothed. This stopped more water from coming in. His hands reached forward, removing the hair strands scattered all over the place, gathering them back one by one. "You shouldn't cut your hair," he said to Iris after he gathered them. She pouted at his scolding, taking the strands from his hands. With both hands grabbing the strands, she placed each of them on her head, and Ryuk watched as a brilliant rainbow light flashed through the room. When it dispersed, Iris's hair was whole once more. "I can always rejoin them," she said with a happy grin, obviously proud of her ability. With the hair removed, the Zafir Kraken, of course, could move once more, but it was also currently frozen in Ryuk's ice, unable to move. "That girl is called the Rainbow Monster back in the Oraskan organization. She's a level 7 anomalous threat, the highest grade of threat amongst the experiments, and one of the 3 level 7 anomalous threats in the entire base. "What is she doing with you?" the Zephyr Kraken asked, faint caution in its voice. All it got was Ryuk sighing as his hands grabbed one of its tentacles and pulled it out, before throwing it to the side. Then, white scales briefly covered his arms, and from his fingers, white flames began burning. Dipping them into the cube, he watched as the water instantly started to boil, but it only lasted for a couple seconds before all the water immediately dried up, steam filling the air. With the mist out, he turned to the prisms and counted, noticing there were still 14, and none of them were missing yet. His devices, which he planned to use to design new techno-warriors, were still relatively okay since they were water-resistant. But he couldn't find his chair, meaning it had probably been thrown out into the sea. At least the important things are still okay. He consoled himself beneath his breath. "Hey!" he called, turning to look at the wobbling octopus. "What's your name?" he asked. The Zephyr Kraken scoffed in annoyance, replying, "You don't deserve to know." "Then, I'll call you Zephyr." "What the? How did you know?" It screamed out in shock, only to notice Ryuk also looking back at him in dumb shock. "I thought Zephyr would be good because it's called a Zephyr Kraken. Who would have thought that's its real name? Get my name out of your mouth, you feeble-looking thing!" It cursed, and Ryuk raised an eyebrow, looking Zephyr up and down. In a way, why did it look like it was referring to itself? "You threw away my chair," Ryuk called out, watching the Zephyr blink its 4 eyes at him, speechless. "Oh, I'm sorry. Losing your chair must have hurt a lot. A lot more than being forced into a contract against your will." It barked out loud, and Ryuk finally knew the reason for its anger. He could only sigh, heading out of the lab. "I'm planning to go get some fresh air. You coming?" As much as Zephyr wanted to refuse anything he asked, just to annoy the hell out of this feeble-looking bastard, it also wished for nothing more than to see what lay beyond this underwater bunker. So, without saying a yes or no, it simply reduced its tentacles to a smaller height and followed Ryuk out. At the side of the room, Ryuk tapped on a button, and the wall opened up, revealing a glass-like barrier in the shape of an elevator. Stepping into it with Iris, Zephyr followed too, and he tapped another button inside the lift as they were whisked upward. Midway, a staring contest occurred between Iris, whose head lay on Ryuk's shoulder, pouting as she eyed, behind Ryuk, every inch of Zephyr's movements, while Zephyr itself glared in hate at the tiny girl. To think she, the mighty Zephyr, was subdued a second time, and the one who had done so was such a spoiled little thing. That ability of hers must be the so-called God authority. Nothing can truly fight against such a power, it thought to itself. Just then, the world brightened all of a sudden. The glass opened up, and the trio came to stand above the water. It's an entire sea. The second they were out of the bunker and above the sea, the water suddenly splashed heavily, raining down onto both Ryuk and Iris, and they both turned forward to see a figure swimming with intense speed through the water. "Finally, I get to swim in the sea once more." Within his head, Ryuk could hear the gleeful words of Zephyr, leaving him speechless. It had been locked into that prison and a slumber for devil knows how long. The system notification panel blinked before leading to a silent hum from Ryuk, who replied, "So, it's like a fish returning to the water situation." "Huh? Exactly. Huh." All of a sudden, he felt a drag on his hands, and he noticed Iris, who tried to follow suit with Zephyr, but he pulled her back up before she could come in contact with the water. "Don't," he said, and she turned to him with misty eyes. "Why? You'll get wet and a cold," he replied, to which she pouted, disappointed. "Besides, don't you want to fill up that grumpy stomach of yours? I can hear its loud roars, you know," he said, watching as her face turned red. The truth was, Ryuk had only decided to come out because Iris was starving. He could hear her grumbling stomach, and unfortunately, he had forgotten to consider getting some food when he bought the objects he felt they needed to live in the bunker. It just never occurred to him at all. "Hey Zephyr," Ryuk called out, and immediately he felt a tsunami of water rushing towards him with speed. But just before it could rain down on him, Ryuk glided from where he was, appearing to the side and dodging the wave. Turning behind him, he saw a familiar head poke out from the sea. "I'm going to get some food outside? Wanna come?" he asked Zafri, who turned its head to the faraway island, staring at it for about 3 seconds before. Scoff! A scoff rang in Ryuk's head as Zafri dove back into the water and resumed its swimming. Clearly meant no. "Just don't swim too far from the bunker. Okay?" Ryuk screamed after it, but his words were drowned by the sound of a heavily splashing wave. "She's quite a headache, isn't she?" Iris' words echoed in his head as they both looked at the disappearing wave, and Ryuk only sighed helplessly before he flew forward in the direction of the city. "That's true. But the reason for that is at least understandable," he said, but then paused, turning to look at Iris. "You called her a she?" He noticed and watched as Iris nodded with certainty. "Yes, she's a female," she replied to him, a sentence that surprised Ryuk by more than a bit. "That's quite interesting." Tisk, tisk. You know, it's not every day one sees an archguard coming to spend time in such a low-level restaurant. The words echoed loudly, leading to Ryuk pausing, his sight from the window he was currently looking at. He was currently sitting on a round table meant for two. Iris sat down opposite him with about 7 empty plates in front of her, and 5 more filled to the brim, yet to be finished. The loud words brought him out of his silent pondering, and he turned to the side to find someone standing by their table, looking at Ryuk with a clearly taunting grin. The one before him was a man in his late 20s, with lackluster, short golden hair that danced around with the breeze. He seemed no different from the ordinary fallen, but if there was one thing impossible to ignore about him, it would be his muscles, which bulged tight against the bicep-length round neck sleeve he was wearing. "Is there a way I can help you?" Ryuk replied calmly, watching the taunting expression fade to a grin. "Yes, there is Archguard," he replied, and Ryuk noticed his eyes faintly cross over the halo he currently had revealed behind him. A brief emotion of jealousy and anger faintly crossed through, passing faster than lightning, but it didn't escape Ryuk's notice. "Get out, and go to your high-grade restaurant, more fitting for guardians like you?" he replied loudly. His loud voice brought attention from the other Fallens sitting in the bar, and naturally, Ryuk found himself in the limelight. A sensation that he didn't particularly like, but he felt even more irritated when he turned to look at Iris. The little girl who had been happily gorging on plate after plate had now stopped eating, obviously disturbed. "Hey, you deaf?" I said. "Get." The muscular guy pressed on, and just when Ryuk made up his mind to shut him up for good, the sound of a heavy grab could be heard as a figure mysteriously appeared behind the man, holding his shoulder tight and forcing his words to a stop. "And who the hell?" the guy said, a vein popping on his head as he turned his neck, but froze in shock when he saw who held him from behind. It was a scary-looking fallen man, seemingly in his middle-aged years, who had the left side of his face marred by blade scars, and what was worse, he was twice the size of the man. "I am the owner of the restaurant and my apologies for the breach of space," the man said, his face as hard as steel, even though he was apologizing. "I felt it needed to inform you that everyone, including Archguards, is allowed to sit in the restaurant, just as much as any other Fallen is. Asking one out goes against our protocol, and if you continue, I'm afraid the restaurant will also have to forcefully interject," he said, his threat clear even when wrapped in the flowery words. Anger was all Grazel felt, but in the end he bit down on his lips. As much as he was annoyed at the presence of the young man behind him, he was an Archguard, meaning he was more likely to be strong than weak, although Grazel would argue his life that he was better and could win in a contest of strength. But with this man who represents the will of the restaurant, he would be fighting not just one but 2 strong opponents, and what's more, he would legally be in the wrong. That wasn't worth it, so in the end, he could only scoff loudly, snicker at Ryuk for being lucky before storming out of the place. With the hot-blooded young man having disappeared, peace returned to the restaurant once more. The man who claimed to be the owner turned to Ryuk and voiced out an apology, which Ryuk waved off, ruffing Iris' hair with a reassuring smile. It seemed to instill her newfound confidence, as she dived straight back into the food, the speed of which made him silently chuckle. Turning away, he resumed his look out the window, but in reality, congratulations on successfully bonding with a Zaffrey Kraken. Would host like to see the pet's attribute panel? The system panel notification flashed, and he replied, yes. Pets. Name Zaffer. Race, Zaffrey Kraken. Cultivation stage, ancestral level beast. So, it's an ancestral level beast, just like Isha. Ryuk thought silently, looking at Zaffer's panel. Energy type, Oregon Apex Energy. Oregon Apex Energy? That's new. It was the first time he had heard that. Pet's fundamental skills and abilities. 1. True King Kraken Transformation. 2. Oregon Soul Domain. 3. True Tentacular Manipulation. 4. Oregon Soul Sucking Pores. 5. Zaffrey Kraken Overdrive. Important note. This list of skills is what should be possible for a Zaffrey Kraken at the ancestral level beasts according to the information from the Soul Fusion and recorded database. There's a very high chance host's pet might be capable of much more, and those above are just the least it should possess. The system panel blinked before Ryuk, who hummed beneath his breath. He wasn't too familiar with the skills, but he believed that when he had tried to awaken Zaffer, only to end up pulled to a dark void realm, that must have been the Oregon Soul Domain. Apart from that, there are at least 4 more skills of hers that I have no clue at all how they work. Wish there was a side explanation, but even having this is already out of this world for most. I just need to take some time observing her, he thought and continued with the panel. Due to fusion, as usual, host has gained a random skill from the skill list of the pet. Skill, Zaffer Kraken Overdive. Skill level, 1. Description. Grants host the ability to enter into a berserk transformation stage that normally only occurs when a Zaffer Kraken is pushed to the brink of death. This is one of the most powerful and dangerous combat states a Zaffrey Kraken can achieve. Important note. Intelligence stats will suffer a massive loss, up to a 70% loss, when in this state. Zaffrey Kraken Overdrive, huh? Ryuk mused silently. The skill showed potential even only at LV.1, but there was a tiny problem. When he had contracted Isha and had activated the Frost Veil skill, he had only been able to hold that ability for a few seconds before Isha collapsed. The reason was that he was sharing her energy due to a lack of his, so in the end, he had to take up cultivating frost energy. But now that he couldn't cultivate, how was he to possess the Orgaon energy for him to personally activate without using the skill? Just copy Zaffrey's energy with your hurricane runes. The system replied, to be able to use a technique truly, I have to believe I already know the technique or am used to the technique. It doesn't work by just saying, activate Zaffrey Overdrive. So, I have to ask Zaffer exactly how it works and reimagine that, or I watch Zaffer enter into such a state. Might sound like a disadvantage not being able to use the skill instantly, but I think it gets rid of you having to spend months on end cultivating. You only need to see the skill being used once, and once you copy Oregon energy, you'll be able to use the skill as good as Zaffrey herself uses it, with 10 times more effectiveness. True, he thought. That was the advantage of switching to Hurricane. Burp! The sound of a loud, satisfied belching woke him up, as he deactivated the system panel, turning to look at Iris sitting before him. Right now, she was reclining against her chair, with a bubbling stomach that kept jiggling here and there. You really ate to your fill, didn't you? Ryuk said, looking at the plates on the table. A total of 12 dishes had been wiped clean by her in one go. I want tot. Sleep. The tired and weary voice echoed in Ryuk's head, and he grinned, rising to his feet and picking her up, before walking out of the restaurant. He had not walked far when her snore reached his ears, and he threw her behind him, before rising into the air and soaring into the distance. It's not every day one sees an archguard coming to eat here. Could he be new around here? He also seemed very young. Could the girl be his daughter? She really is a cute thing. What's with her monstrous appetite, though? The second he and Iris were out, murmurs naturally followed. By the counter, the man, who claimed to be the owner of the restaurant, could hear all of this while wiping a glass cup with a clean white handkerchief. His eyes went away from the cup, and for a second, he turned to glance at the table where Ryuk and Iris had sat to eat. A flicker of light flashed through his eyes, and eventually he finished cleaning the cup. Then he blinked twice, a notification panel appearing, which he quickly tapped on. 10 seconds of tapping, and the panel dispersed, before he picked up another cup and continued his wiping.
Hey
Zafri, Ryuk called out when he reached back to the bunker area. The waves around were calm, and just as he expected, the Zafri Kraken was nowhere to be found. But he didn't have to re-summon her to his side when he watched a powerful wave crashing towards him with speed once more. Immediately, Ryu blinked, moving out of the way and narrowly dodging the seawater that ravaged through where he had been. "What's with you and trying to get me wet anyway?" he asked, turning behind him to find a head poking out of the water. But this time, Zafir's expression wasn't neutral or disdainful like always. She actually held a grin instead. A wicked grin. "Oh, someone's in a good mood?" Ryuk called out, watching as Zafri rose higher and higher into the air, until she stood a head taller. "You both can go back to your little man cave. I need more time swimming," she said, preparing to dive back into the water. "No," Ryuk voiced out firmly as she paused, turning to look at him. "I can't risk you being seen or having this location revealed. Something bound to happen with that tsunami that follows you around," he said, watching Zafri give him a suspicious look. "What crime did you commit?" she asked, making Ryuk almost want to cough up blood. "I committed no crime. Why are you hiding away then?" "I'm not hiding," he said, tapping his feet on the water while forcing out an "Execute open protocol," he ordered, and Zafir watched as a glass-like barrier appeared out of the water's surface, its top opening up. Ryuk turned to look at Zafir, who looked at the opening, but still with no intention of going in. "Can you swim faster than me?" Zafir asked Ryuk, who shrugged. "I think that's an interesting topic, but," he said, pausing to look at the sleeping Iris in his arms, "I don't have time for that. Maybe next time, though," he said before continuing down. Zafir looked at the opening, which remained as if also waiting for her entrance. She debated for a while before eventually sighing. "I guess there'll always be a next time," she muttered to herself, jumping out of the water and disappearing into the opening, which closed gently and dipped back into the sea. When Ryuk got back in, the first thing he did was tuck Iris into the bed sofa. With that done, he exhaled in faint relief before heading into his lab, where Zafri was already in. When he took his seat, he found her tinkering with the other prisms in the lab. All of these prisms are holding the other LV.3 beast. I remember being locked up with a couple of them before falling into slumber. What happened? How did we end up here? Zafri asked Ryuk, who got onto the computer and began working. But at the same time, he explained. The organization abducted my two other contracted beasts. So, I went out for them, coincidentally with when they were under attack by some other powerful organization. They were trying to get all of the prisms and experiments out to another place, but they weren't fast enough, allowing me to burst in and get Isha out. She asked me to bring you all together, saying it will be a waste if you all get crushed by the collapsing rubble of the organization. So, he explained, and at the end of it, Zafri understood well what had happened. She didn't know whether to believe him or not, but at least, his explanation seemed viable and they came out smoothly enough. "So, what did you plan on doing with these beasts? Fuse with them all, one by one?" she asked, and Ryuk nodded. "Yes." She gave one last look at the prism in her hand before she threw it off into the pile. "How many beasts have you fused with up to now?" she asked, walking up to him. "2. That's low," she said with a slight taunt to annoy him. "They won't be soon," Ryuk replied casually, focused on the drawing panel of the computer. Your other two beasts, where are they? She asked in interest. Not here. I want to see them, she demanded. And why is that? Ryuk asked. To check whether your my beasts are my family saying is true, she replied, watching Ryuk turn from the computer, which all his attention was focused on, to stare at her. What? I'm pretty sure you can't know that from simply seeing or asking them, he replied, turning his attention back to his work, whilst adding, and why did you even care about that anyway? At least if I'm getting forced under a contract beyond my will, at least I should know what type of jackass I'm getting forced under? She returned, causing Ryuk to roll his eyes. I don't know, Zafir. But maybe it's a jackass that saved you from being buried to death back in that ship, or waking you up from the slumber that would most likely have continued for as long as 2 years due to those hidden injuries on you, and also healed you from it, getting you back to your peak state. You know about the hidden injuries? She asked in surprise, although Ryuk didn't respond. TCH, that doesn't excuse the fact that I'm not here of my own will. Well then, would you have preferred to still remain in slumber up until now, and continue getting experimented on until death, compared to your current situation? Yes, I would, she said, only to get a helpless shrug from him. Interesting choice, he replied, obviously uninterested. She scoffed in annoyance at his lack of interest, but her curiosity still got the better of her. Just what is he even doing and so serious about? From behind, she peered her head onto the screen Ryuk was looking at, and her eyebrows furrowed at the various images that were being drawn. Images of humanoid 2D figures with odd forms. Odd forms in the sense that one had a curved blade from the back of its wrist up until its elbow, and another one had 6 arms, whose ends ended with the nozzles of a gun. They were of different anomaly forms, but if one word could describe them, each of the figures being drawn was obviously related to battle, geared towards destruction in one way or another. And what are you doing? She asked him, and he answered. Designing, he replied. All I see you do is waste precious time by drawing out unrealistic evolution paths.